Taylor Parker didn't convince Wade Griffin with one lie. She pulled him through a whole cycle of almosts. They almost had twins. They almost had family money. They almost had a ranch. They almost had a future. And every time one version of that future started to fall apart, another crisis or another promise seemed to take its place. So the question is not just, how did Wade believe Taylor was pregnant for 10 months? The better question is, what had Taylor already built around him that made disbelief feel almost impossible? Hi, this is Tina. Welcome back to Motive and Method. If you're new here, I approach true crime through a communication and framing lens. I look at language, patterns, narratives, and the way people create meaning around a case. I earned a BA in communication with honors, and since then, I built extensive experience in written and verbal communication. I also currently work full-time in consultative sales, where listening, framing, trust, resistance, persuasion, and decision-making are part of the work every day. I'm not a psychologist, and I'm not here to diagnose Taylor Parker, Wade Griffin, or anyone else involved in this case. What I want to look at today is the structure of the deception, specifically how Taylor Parker kept Wade believing a fake pregnancy for 10 months. Yes, 10 months. And for anyone new to this case, Taylor Parker was a Texas woman who faked a pregnancy for months while telling her boyfriend, Wade Griffin, that they were expecting a baby together. But there was no pregnancy. In October 2020, Parker attacked and killed Reagan Hancock, a pregnant woman who had been her friend, and then removed Reagan's unborn baby from her body. Parker later tried to present that baby as her own. Reagan and her baby did not survive. Taylor Parker was later convicted of capital murder and sentenced to death in Texas. And one piece of context that matters for this analysis is that the pregnancy was not the only future Taylor was selling. There were also claims about family money, inheritance, land, oil and gas royalties, and a ranch that Wade was supposedly going to have. So, when we talk about the fake pregnancy in this video, we're not talking about a simple lie that spiraled out of control. We're talking about a deception that became the center of Taylor's relationship, her identity, her future plans, and eventually a devastating crime. Before we get into it, I just wanted to let you know that channel memberships are open if you want to support Motive and Method and get member perks. You can also use the thanks button below the video, and depending on what device you're on, some of those options may be under the 3 dots menu. Some viewers may also see the option to gift memberships. No pressure, of course. Watching, liking, commenting, and sharing all help the channel more than you know. So let's get going with this. In my last Taylor Parker video, I talked about how the fake pregnancy was not just a pregnancy lie. It became a system, a false reality built around pregnancy, inheritance, family conflict, fake evidence, social proof, and emotional leverage. This video is part 2 of that idea. Because once we understand the system Taylor built, the next question is, how did that system work on Wade? And to answer that, I don't think we can start with the 2020 pregnancy by itself. Because Wade was not being asked to evaluate one strange claim in isolation. By that point, he had already been pulled through a long sequence of promises, setbacks, explanations, and emergencies. There was a business opportunity, the family land, the family money that she pretended she had, the ranch, the pregnancy with twins, the claimed loss, the family conflict, then another pregnancy, then more delays, more explanations, and more crises. So, by the time we get to the fake pregnancy that lasted into 2020, Wade was not standing outside the story, calmly asking, "Does this make sense?" He was already inside the story and had been for months. And that matters because a lie is much easier to question when it arrives by itself. But when that lie is attached to a relationship, a shared future, and a whole emotional history, questioning it can feel like pulling on a thread that might unravel everything. That is why I keep coming back to the idea of almost. Taylor seemed to keep Wade close to the edge of something that was always about to happen. The deal was almost there. The money was almost coming. The ranch was almost real. The family was almost beginning. And then, when one version of the future fell apart, another promise or another crisis seemed to take its place, over and over again. That kind of emotional pattern can be destabilizing. It keeps the other person reacting instead of reflecting. They are dealing with the next explanation, the next delay, the next disappointment, the next hope. And when someone is always reacting to the next thing, they may never get the quiet space needed to ask the most basic question. Wait, does any of this actually add up? One detail I think matters more than it may seem at first is the earlier pregnancy claim. Before the 2020 fake pregnancy, Taylor had already told Wade she was pregnant with twins. Then she claimed she lost them. So, before Wade was asked to believe the 2020 pregnancy, he had already been placed in the role of expectant father once before. And then that role was taken away. That is not a small thing. If someone tells you we're having twins, and then later tells you those babies are gone, that creates grief, attachment, confusion, and emotional intensity very early in the relationship. And if that claim was not true, then it was not only a lie, it was emotional positioning. Because Wade had already been made into the man who almost had children with Taylor. So when Taylor later claimed another pregnancy, that may not have felt like a completely new story. It may have felt like the future they had already lost was being offered again. That matters, because now questioning the 2020 pregnancy may also mean questioning the earlier story. The twins, the loss, the grief. Even the emotional foundation of the relationship comes into play if he were to question the 2020 pregnancy. At some point, disbelief does not just mean maybe this pregnancy is fake. It becomes a much bigger and more painful question. How much of this relationship was fake? And that is a much harder thing to face. The next piece is the future Taylor was selling Wade. Because the pregnancy was not floating around by itself. It was attached to money, land, a ranch, family conflict, and this whole picture of the life they were supposedly building together. Taylor allegedly presented herself as someone connected to serious family money. There were claims about inheritance, land, oil and gas royalties, and millions of dollars. And at one point, that imagined future included a ranch for Wade. That matters because Wade was not only being asked to believe Taylor is pregnant, he was also being asked to stay invested in a future where the money would come through, a future where the conflict would eventually resolve, a future where the ranch, the baby, and the family life would all make the chaos worth it. The next piece is how Taylor handled doubt. Because people around Wade were not all blindly accepting this story. There were concerns. Many people had concerns around Wade of what was happening. Wade's mother had concerns. Stephanie, one of Wade's good friends, noticed problems with the gender reveal information. Other people were hearing things, seeing things, or picking up on details that did not add up. So, the issue was not that no one ever questioned Taylor. The issue was that Taylor seemed to have a frame ready for the people who did. And that is one of the most powerful things a deceptive person can do. They do not just lie about the facts. They try to control how you interpret the people who challenge those facts. So, if Wade's mother questioned the pregnancy, Taylor could shift the meaning of that concern. Instead of, you know, my mother is worried because something feels wrong, which is what Wade would say to her, it could become, out of Taylor's mouth, your mother does not want us to be happy. If Stephanie found something concerning, that did not necessarily get treated as a real warning sign. It could be folded into a bigger story about interference, jealousy, conflict, or people trying to ruin what Taylor and Wade supposedly had. And once that happens, the question changes. It is no longer just, is Taylor pregnant? Now it becomes, who are you loyal to? That is a dangerous shift, because now a factual question has been turned into a relationship test. Instead of simply asking, can we verify this? The conversation can become, why don't you believe me? A concerned family member stops being a concerned family member and becomes an obstacle. A crack in the story becomes an attack on the relationship. And a reasonable question becomes evidence that someone is against them. That is how doubt gets emotionally punished. And when doubt gets punished, people may stop bringing it forward. Not because the doubt is gone, but because expressing it costs too much. Then there is a timing, because this was happening during the pandemic, and COVID gave Taylor something a lie often means: a believable reason why normal verification was suddenly unavailable. In another year, at another time, Wade might have expected to go to appointments with her. He might have expected to hear information directly from medical staff. He might have seen more of the normal routines that come with a pregnancy. But in 2020, those routines were disrupted for a lot of people. So, if Taylor said he could not come into an appointment because of COVID restrictions, that could sound plausible. Not because her story was true, but because the excuse was attached to something everyone already knew was happening. So it made sense. That is what made it useful as a cover. COVID did not create the lie, but it gave the lie walls. It gave Taylor a socially believable explanation for why Wade could not easily verify what was going on. And this is important because effective deception often uses something real as camouflage. The pandemic created confusion, separation, and changed expectations around medical care. Taylor could take that real-world disruption and use it to protect a false story. So once again, Wade was not being asked to believe something outrageous in a normal world. He was being asked to believe it in a world where everything seemed to turn upside down, where normal had already been knocked sideways. There was also the issue of physical access. Wade reportedly said that Taylor did not really want him to see her naked because she said she was insecure about stretch marks and changes to her body during the pregnancy. And that is another place where the explanation worked, because it sounded emotionally believable. In a real pregnancy, body insecurity can be completely understandable. A woman's body is changing, and that can come with vulnerability, discomfort, and self-consciousness. So, on the surface, Taylor's explanation gave Wade a reason to back off. But in this context, it also functioned as a barrier. It gave Taylor privacy around the exact thing that could have exposed the lie. If Wade pushed too hard, he could be made to feel cruel or insensitive. And then another reason the lie kept working was that Taylor did not only tell Wade she was pregnant, she staged pregnancy. She bought a silicone belly, a fake ultrasound, maternity photos, social media posts, baby updates, and a gender reveal party. And that matters because people are much more likely to believe something they think they have seen. An ultrasound can feel like proof. So can a visible belly feel like proof that she is pregnant. Who's going to question that? And so can photos, public announcements, and other people celebrating along with you. But in Taylor's case, those things were not proof. They were a performance. I would call it evidence theater. Evidence theater is when someone creates the appearance of proof without the reality behind it. That is what made it powerful. Taylor used the normal rituals of pregnancy to make an abnormal lie feel socially believable. And once those rituals become public, the lie gained weight. It was no longer just something she told Wade privately. It was something other people were now reacting to, celebrating, and helping reinforce. So, when we put these pieces together, we can see the larger pattern. That is why I think the timeline matters. This relationship was not a long, stable partnership where one lie suddenly appeared out of nowhere. It was intense, it moved fast, and it was full of promises, crises, family drama, pregnancy claims, financial claims, and emotional pressure. And intensity can feel like intimacy. But intensity is not the same as truth. A relationship can feel deep because so much is happening. That does not mean what is happening is real. So, why did Wade stay inside the story? I do not think the answer is simply he was fooled. I think the story gave him something. He appeared to have started to give him what he wanted, which was a ranch, and then a family, and he wanted to be a father. And this way, it gave him a future. It gave him the role of father. It gave him the possibility of money, land, and a ranch. And it gave him a relationship that may have felt dramatic, important, and hard-won. By the time people were warning him, he may have already had too much invested to easily step out of it. Because stepping outside would mean looking back at the entire question and asking a brutal question. Was any of this real? And there was another problem with Taylor's lie. Pregnancy has a clock. Eventually, there has to be a baby, a loss, or a collapse. And according to people around Wade, some believe Taylor would eventually have to fake a miscarriage. It would have been an exit. Unfortunately, Taylor did not take that exit. Instead, the lie kept moving toward its deadline. And that is what makes this case so horrifying. The fake pregnancy was not sustainable. The story needed an ending. And rather than letting the lie collapse, Taylor tried to make the lie real. Not by becoming pregnant. Taylor could not become pregnant, but by taking a baby from someone else. So, when people ask, how did Wade believe Taylor Parker was pregnant for 10 months? I think we have to look at more than the pregnancy. We have to look at the whole system around it. The earlier pregnancy claim, the loss that she claimed to have had with the babies, the money, the ranch, the family interference frame, the COVID barriers, the body insecurity explanation, the staged evidence, the warnings framed as sabotage, and yes, the cycle of almost. Taylor Parker did not convince Wade with one lie. She built a world around him. And inside that world, believing her meant protecting the baby, the relationship, the ranch, the money, and the future. But doubting her meant risking all of it. That is why this case is so disturbing from a communication and framing perspective, as well as other perspectives, of course. The lie did not survive because it was perfect. It survived because Taylor kept giving people reasons to stay inside of it. And by the time the truth finally broke through, it was not just one false pregnancy that collapsed. It was the entire reality Taylor had built around it. So now, I want to know what you guys think. Do you think Wade believed Taylor because the evidence looked convincing? Because the future she promised him was too hard to give up? Or do you think there was something else going on here? Let me know in the comments. And if you found this analysis helpful, please like the video, subscribe to Motive and Method, and share it with someone who follows this case. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.